Rancher, do you just want something from me like everyone else? The Apache widow demanded. The sun was just beginning to rise over the desert when John Mercer rode slowly along the dusty trail. His horse's hooves stirred small clouds of sand with every step, and the wind carried the faint scent of sagebrush and dry earth. John was a rancher, strong and weathered from years under the harsh sun, with hands that told stories of hard work and long days. He had recently purchased a piece of land on the outskirts of the Apache settlement, a stretch of desert and hills that promised both opportunity and challenge. But he knew that the land did not belong to him alone, and that the people who lived there had called it home for generations. He had heard stories from neighboring ranchers about the Apache community, about their fierce independence, their distrust of outsiders, and the many times they had been taken advantage of by men who came only for profit. John knew he needed to tread carefully. Bane. As he approached the settlement, he could see the small cabins scattered across the rocky landscape. Smoke rose from the chimneys, curling into the clear blue sky. Children's laughter echoed from behind a cluster of buildings, and the sound carried a mix of innocence and curiosity. Women moved between cabins, tending small gardens, carrying water, and keeping a watchful eye on the younger children. Among them was Lita, a widow who had become both respected and feared in her community. She was known for her strength and independence, traits that had only grown sharper since her husband had died. Lita had lived through loss, betrayal, and hardship, and she had learned that trust was not something to give lightly.
John stopped his horse a short distance from Lita's cabin, careful to appear non-threatening.
He dismounted and brushed the dust from his coat before walking slowly toward the porch.
His heart was steady, but he could feel the tension in the air.
He had been in situations like this before, dealing with cautious communities and wary individuals, but there was something about Lita's presence that made him pause.
Her eyes, dark and alert, were fixed on him the moment he stepped onto the path. She did not smile, did not nod, and did not speak. Bet. Instead, she leaned against the doorway, arms crossed, her posture rigid yet poised, as if she were ready to defend herself or her home at a moment's notice. "Good morning," John said, keeping his voice calm and respectful. "My name is John Mercer. I just bought some land nearby and I wanted to introduce myself." He glances around in despair. "I hope I'm not intruding."
She tilted her head, studying him carefully. "Are you here for business or for pleasure?" she asked, her voice steady and firm.
There was no warmth in her tone, only the sharp edge of suspicion. "I'm here to understand," John replied honestly. "I want to know the land, the people, and how to live respectfully here. I don't mean to cause trouble." Her gaze lingered on him for a long moment, as if she were weighing his words against something unseen. Then she shook her head slightly. "Everyone says that," she said. "Everyone promises respect. But in the end, they want something. Land, money, power. Something that belongs to us. Why would you be any different?" John could feel the weight of her words, the history behind them, and the pain that they carried. He knew that for Lita, trust was not given freely. It was earned, and often at great cost. "Best. Because I've seen what happens when people take without care," he said. "I've lost things in my life too, and I know the value of respect and honesty." Brave. "I don't expect you to believe me right away. All I can do is show it." Lita's eyes softened for just a moment, a flicker of curiosity passing through the wariness that had built around her heart. But it was fleeting. She straightened her shoulders and motioned for him to sit on the edge of the porch. "You can sit," she said, "but know this. I will watch you. Every move you make. Every word you say. If you are like the others, I will know, and I will not hesitate. John nodded, understanding the seriousness of her words. He lowered himself carefully onto the wooden steps, keeping his posture relaxed but respectful. From where he sat, he could see more of the settlement. Children playing near a small corral, elders tending to animals, and women carrying baskets filled with vegetables. Life here was simple, harsh, and yet full of quiet resilience. John felt a growing respect for the people who had managed to thrive in such a demanding environment. For several moments, neither spoke. The wind rustled through the sparse trees, carrying the sound of distant birds and the faint hum of activity. John finally broke the silence. "I've worked on ranches all my life," he began. "I know hard work. I know the land. But I've never lived in a place like this, where every person has had to fight for their survival. I want to understand, not take advantage. That's all I ask." Lita considered him carefully. She could sense the sincerity in his tone, the steadiness in his posture, and the respect in his words. Still, years of betrayal had left her cautious. "Words are easy," she said. "Actions are harder. If you want to prove anything, you'll have to show it through deeds, not talk." John nodded again. "I understand. I'll earn your trust if you let me." No tricks, no shortcuts. Just honesty and hard work. A faint smile tugged at the corner of Lita's lips, though she quickly pushed it away.
"We'll see," she said.
Breaths. "We'll see." Over the next few hours, John observed the daily life of the settlement. He watched Lita move with purpose, carrying water, checking on her small garden, and speaking quietly with neighbors. He saw how children gravitated toward her, sensing her strength but also her fairness. He noticed how the elders respected her opinion, and how she handled disagreements with calm authority. Every detail impressed him. He realized that Lita was not just a widow. She was a leader in her own right, a woman who had faced immense challenges and had grown stronger because of them. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, John helped carry a few bundles of firewood. Lita watched him, arms crossed, but said nothing. He worked steadily, not seeking praise, simply doing what was needed. The rhythm of labor, the sound of splitting wood, and the quiet determination in both of their movements created an unspoken understanding. Trust, John knew, would not be given today, or even tomorrow. It would take time, but he was willing to wait. By late afternoon, the settlement had quieted. The children had retreated indoors, and the elders had finished their chores. Lita approached John, who was now seated near the corral, brushing dust off his hands. She stood for a moment, looking out at the horizon, then back at him. "You're not like the others," she said finally, her voice softer than before. "But don't mistake that for trust. You still have much to prove." John smiled faintly. "I don't expect immediate trust," he said. "I only hope for a chance to show you who I am." For the first time that day, Lita nodded, a gesture small but significant. It was an acknowledgement, not of friendship, but of recognition, of a man who was willing to meet her standards, who was willing to understand before taking. The desert around them stretched endlessly, harsh and unforgiving, yet beautiful in its raw simplicity. It was a place where survival required strength, patience, and respect, qualities that both John and Lita embodied, though in very different ways. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, John prepared to leave the settlement for the evening. Lita watched him mount his horse, the wind tugging at her dark hair. "Tomorrow," she said quietly, almost to herself, "we will see more. And maybe then we will know if you are truly different."
John nodded, feeling the weight of her words.
He did not make promises he could not keep. Instead, he rode slowly back toward his new land, the fading light casting long shadows across the desert. He thought about the day, about the cautious eyes that had watched him, and about the woman who had challenged him with a single question. Why would he be any different from everyone else? That question would stay with him, lingering in his mind like the last rays of the setting sun. And as night fell over the rugged landscape, John Mercer knew one thing for certain. He would do whatever it took to prove that he was not like the others. The next morning, John Mercer rose before the sun, as he always did, to check on his land. The desert was quiet, the air cool and crisp, with only the sound of his horse's hooves and the faint rustle of wind through the sagebrush. He had spent the night thinking about Lita, the Apache widow who had challenged him the day before. Her words had lingered in his mind, echoing with a mix of accusation and strength. But why would you be any different from everyone else? She had asked. And John knew he had to find a way to answer that, not with words but with actions. He prepared a simple breakfast by the small fire near his new homestead, the aroma of coffee and toasted bread mixing with the earthy scent of the desert. Today he intended to visit Lita again, not to intrude, but to observe and understand. He wanted to see how she managed her daily tasks, how she interacted with her neighbors, and how she cared for her family. He knew that only by understanding her life could he begin to prove that he was sincere. When he arrived at the settlement, he noticed the subtle ways in which life here operated. The children moved quickly between chores and play, learning responsibility at an early age. Women carried water from the nearby stream with skillful efficiency, and the elders watched quietly, offering guidance only when necessary. Lita was in the middle of it all, her movements deliberate and precise, yet graceful in a way that spoke of years of hard work and adaptation. She was repairing a section of the fence around her small corral, bending and stretching to hammer nails into weathered wood. Her concentration was absolute, and John knew better than to interrupt. He approached slowly, calling out softly, "Good morning, Lita. Need a hand?" Lita did not look up immediately. She kept hammering the nails, her jaw tight, her posture steady. "I can manage," she said at last, without turning to face him. "But if you truly want to help, you can gather some firewood from the ridge. The wind has dried the branches, and they will burn well." John nodded and rode toward the ridge, scanning the ground for suitable wood. As he worked, he noticed small signs of the life that surrounded the settlement. Tracks of animals crisscrossed the desert floor. A coyote's den peeked from beneath a rock, and desert flowers clung stubbornly to life in the harsh soil. He thought about how similar this community was to the desert itself. Resilient, cautious, beautiful in ways that were not immediately obvious, and yet capable of thriving in a place that could be unforgiving. When he returned with a bundle of branches, Lita glanced at him briefly, her eyes calculating and unreadable. She accepted the wood with a nod, placing it carefully near the fire pit. "Not bad," she said. "But your work is only useful if you understand the rhythm of life here." Everything has a place, a purpose, and a reason. If you disrupt it, even with good intentions, you do more harm than good. John knelt beside the fire, arranging the wood as she had instructed. He understood her point. Life here was not just about survival. It was about harmony, about knowing the land and the people intimately. One misstep could cause tension, mistrust, or even danger. He felt a sense of humility, realizing that earning her trust would require patience, attentiveness, and respect above all else. Throughout the day, John stayed close but kept his distance when necessary, observing without interfering. He watched as Lita worked with neighbors to repair a water trough, teaching a young girl how to secure the planks and hammer the nails properly. There was pride in her voice, but also firmness, ensuring that the work was done correctly. John admired her ability to balance care with authority, knowing that she had learned through experience how to survive and maintain respect in a world that had not always been kind. At midday, Lita finally spoke to him directly.
"You want to know why I am wary, don't you?" she asked. her eyes focused on the water flowing into the trough. "It is because I have seen what people can take from us."
They come with smiles, promises, and gifts, but they leave with our land, our resources, and sometimes our lives. I will not allow that to happen again. Bet. John nodded solemnly. I understand. I cannot change the past, but I can choose how I act now. Breath. I am not here to take. I am here to learn and respect. If you give me the chance, I will prove it. She paused for a long moment studying him, and then said, Actions speak louder than words, John Mercer. Watch and listen, and perhaps you will begin to understand. But remember, the desert does not forgive carelessness, and neither do the people who call it home. The rest of the afternoon was spent in quiet observation. John helped where he could without overstepping, fetching water, carrying tools, and assisting with minor repairs. He noticed how Lita spoke to her neighbors, the tone of her voice shifting depending on who she addressed and what she needed from them. She was patient, but not easily fooled, firm but fair, cautious yet capable of compassion. John realized that this careful balance was what had allowed her and her community to survive despite countless hardships. As the sun began its slow descent, casting long shadows across the settlement, a small incident brought the day into sharp focus. A child had wandered too close to a cliff near the edge of the settlement. John saw the danger immediately and acted without hesitation. He sprinted across the uneven ground, catching the child just as he slipped. The child's eyes were wide with fear, and John's heart pounded, but he managed to pull him to safety. Lita arrived moments later, her expression unreadable. She examined the situation quickly, then looked at John.
You acted without hesitation, she said quietly.
Hesitation. That is different. Most men would have hesitated, calculating the risk to themselves rather than focusing on the child. John shook his head. I could not let him fall. It was the right thing to do. Her eyes softened for the briefest moment, and John sensed that he had taken a step forward in earning her cautious respect. It was not trust, not yet, but it was a recognition that he could act with integrity and care, even in the smallest of moments. The evening settled over the settlement, and John helped light the fire for the night. The smell of burning wood mixed with the cool desert air, and the quiet hum of the community settling in for the night created a sense of calm. Lita sat nearby, her eyes reflecting the flames. She spoke quietly, almost as if she were thinking aloud. You may be different, she said, but being different is not enough. But. You must understand the land, the people, and the consequences of every action. Only then will you be accepted. Only then will you be trusted. John nodded, feeling the weight of her words. I want to understand, he said. I want to learn. Best, I will do whatever it takes to show you that I am sincere. She did not respond immediately, but the tilt of her head suggested that she had heard him, and that she would be watching closely in the days to come. John knew that trust could not be demanded, nor could it be hurried. It was something that grew slowly through observation, shared experiences, and proven integrity. As night fell, John returned to his own homestead, reflecting on the day. He thought about the strength and resilience of Lita, about the careful rhythms of life in the Apache settlement, and about the subtle lessons that the land itself had to offer. Each interaction, each observation had taught him something new, not just about Lita, but about patience, respect, and the importance of action over words. He knew that the coming days would not be easy. There would be challenges, misunderstandings, and moments of tension. But he also knew that if he approached each moment with honesty, diligence, and care, he could begin to prove himself. The question Lita had asked the day before, Why would he be any different from everyone else? Was no longer just a challenge. It was a guiding principle for how he would act, how he would live, and how he would interact with her and her community. The desert stretched out around him, vast and silent under the starry sky. John Mercer felt a quiet determination settle over him. He would show, through his actions, that he could be trusted. He would respect the land, honor the people, and prove that he was truly different from the men who had come before. And perhaps, in time, he would earn more than just cautious acknowledgement. He might earn respect, understanding, and the beginning of a fragile but real trust. The night was calm, but John knew that tomorrow would bring new lessons, new challenges, and new opportunities to demonstrate his sincerity. As he lay down to rest, he felt a sense of purpose and resolve. The journey ahead would not be easy, but it was a journey worth taking, and with the memory of Lita's sharp eyes and careful words in his mind, he knew that he would not falter. He would learn, he would respect, and he would act, not for reward, not for gain, but because it was the right thing to do. The morning air was sharp and cool when John Mercer saddled his horse and prepared to ride toward the Apache settlement again. Each day he spent there revealed something new, some detail of life he had not yet noticed, and today he felt a quiet tension in the air that warned him change was coming. The sun had just begun to rise over the horizon, painting the desert hills in shades of gold and orange. It was beautiful, but the beauty of the land also reminded John how harsh it could be. Life here required not only strength, but constant attention and care. One wrong step could bring trouble, and today he would see this firsthand. As John approached the settlement, he noticed a group of men gathered near the edge of the nearby ridge. They were ranchers from a neighboring land, and many had heard of through local gossip. They had come to pressure the Apache community into selling portions of their land. Their tone was sharp, their movements aggressive, and the tension in the air was immediate. Lita was at the center of the settlement, standing firm with her arms crossed, her posture radiating authority. John could see the fire in her eyes, the same fire that had first challenged him to prove himself the day he arrived best. She was not afraid to confront the intruders, but John could sense her concern for the people she protected. John dismounted and moved quietly toward Lita, careful not to appear threatening. "Do you need help?" he asked softly. Lita glanced at him, her expression unreadable. "Stay close," she said. "Watch and learn. This is not your fight yet, but it will be soon if they do not leave." The men stepped closer, their voices rising with each word. They spoke of rights, of ownership, and of the supposed benefits the Apache would gain by selling their land. Lita's voice cut through the tension like steel. "This land is ours. It has been ours for generations, and we will not sell it to men who see only profit and not the life that belongs here." One of the men sneered. "You are just a widow. You cannot hold us off. You will lose your land whether you want to or not." Lita did not flinch. She met his gaze steadily, her voice calm but firm. "I may be a widow, but I am not alone. This community will stand together. You will find no weakness here."
John watched, feeling both awe and concern.
He realized that these men were more dangerous than he had initially thought.
They were not merely seeking land. They were testing boundaries, trying to see who would stand firm and who would bend. Lita's strength and courage were remarkable, but he knew that she could not face this alone. Without hesitation, John stepped forward, placing himself slightly between Lita and the intruders. "These people have a right to their land," he said firmly. "You have no place threatening them. Leave now before things get worse." The men turned toward him, surprised by his boldness. One laughed, dismissing him. And who are you? Another outsider trying to play hero? I am a man who respects this land and the people who live on it, John replied, keeping his voice steady. I will not allow threats or violence against those who have done nothing wrong. There was a moment of silence, a tense pause as the intruders assessed him. Then slowly they began to back away, muttering under their breath, clearly frustrated but unwilling to escalate further. John kept his gaze on them until they disappeared over the ridge, ensuring that the danger had passed. Lyda turned to him, her expression a mix of surprise and gratitude. You acted well, she said softly. You could have left, stayed on your own land and watched. But you did not. That makes a difference. John nodded, feeling the weight of her words.
I could not stand by and watch injustice, he said.
Not here. Not anywhere. The rest of the day passed with a mixture of relief and tension. The community began repairing minor damage from the confrontation, and John assisted where he could, fetching water, carrying supplies, and helping to mend fences. Every action was small but meaningful, and Lyda observed him carefully, noting how he worked alongside others, not above them, and how he did not seek recognition or praise. As the afternoon sun climbed higher, Lyda invited John to help with a task that required both strength and patience. A small irrigation channel had been damaged, threatening the water supply for the settlement's gardens. John knelt beside her, watching as she measured and adjusted the flow of water with precision. This is how we survive here, she explained. Every drop matters. Every action matters. If you do not respect the process, the results fail, and everyone suffers. John listened intently, absorbing not only the practical lesson, but the deeper meaning. Life here was not just about hard work. It was about understanding consequences, about acting responsibly, and about protecting the community and the land. He realized that Lyda's strength came not only from courage but from wisdom, from knowing how to balance assertiveness with care, authority with compassion. As they worked side by side, the conversation turned personal. Lyda spoke carefully about her husband, the man she had lost too soon, and how his death had forced her to take on responsibilities she had never imagined. Her voice was steady, but tinged with sorrow. Life does not always give us choice, she said. Sometimes we are given challenges we do not want, and yet we must face them. That is what makes us who we are. John nodded, understanding her pain, though he could not fully know it. I have faced loss too, he said quietly. It teaches you humility, patience, and strength. It can also teach respect for people, for life, and for the land we rely on. Their conversation was interrupted by the sound of a child's cry from across the settlement. A young boy had fallen while climbing a small rock formation and was sitting on the ground, wincing in pain. John rushed over, checking the child carefully for injuries. Lyda followed immediately, her hands steady and reassuring as she helped assess the situation. Together they tended to the child, calming him and ensuring he was safe. As the boy's tears subsided, Lyda looked at John with a rare softness in her eyes. You do not hesitate when help is needed, she said. That is not something I see often. Most people think only of themselves first. John shrugged modestly. I can only act as I believe is right, he said. I cannot control others, but I can control my actions. That evening, after the work was done, Lyda and John stood near the fire pit, watching the settlement settle into the quiet of night. The tension from the morning had left a lingering awareness, a reminder that life here was fragile and trust was earned slowly. Lyda spoke again, her voice thoughtful. You have proven something today, but do not mistake it for trust. You have only begun. There is still much to learn about us, our lives, and this land. You must continue to observe, to understand, and to act with care. Bye. John nodded, accepting her words without complaint. I will continue, he said. I am here to learn, to respect, and to act rightly. I understand that trust is earned, not given. The night deepened, and the stars above the desert shone brightly, reflecting in John's eyes as he contemplated the events of the day. He had faced danger, witnessed courage, and taken part in the community's life. He realized that living here was not simply a matter of survival. It was a constant test of character, a balance between strength and wisdom, action and restraint. For Lita, the day had reinforced her careful approach to outsiders. She had seen John act differently from the men who had come before, but she remained vigilant. Her experience had taught her that even good intentions could be dangerous if not tempered with understanding and patience. Yet, for the first time, she felt a cautious respect for him, a recognition that he might be someone who could understand the balance of life here. As John prepared to leave the settlement that night, he felt a sense of both exhaustion and purpose. The day had tested him in ways he had not expected, from confrontation with aggressive outsiders to the responsibility of helping care for the community. Yet each challenge had also provided an opportunity to demonstrate his integrity, patience. The desert around him was silent, vast, and unchanging. Yet within that stillness lay lessons of life, resilience, and survival. John knew that the coming days would bring new challenges, more tests of character, and moments that would require him to act decisively and wisely, but he also knew that every experience brought him closer to understanding the rhythms, the responsibilities, and the respect required to live among this proud and independent people. As he lay down to rest under the starry sky, John Mercer felt a quiet determination settle within him. He would continue to prove, through his actions, that he was different from those who had come before. He would learn from Lita, respect the land, and act with integrity, knowing that each choice had consequences for himself and for those around him. And in the quiet desert night, he allowed himself a small measure of hope, that in time, cautious respect might grow into trust, and perhaps even friendship. The next morning, the desert seemed unusually still. Even the wind, which often whispered through the sagebrush and tall grass, was quiet. John Mercer rode toward the Apache settlement, sensing that today might bring challenges unlike any he had faced before. He thought of Lita, the widow who had watched him with sharp eyes since his arrival, and he knew that whatever happened today would test not only his skills but his character and intentions. As he approached, he noticed a small cloud of smoke in the distance. It rose from the far edge of the settlement, near the western hills, curling into the blue sky. John's heart quickened. First, smoke in the desert was never a simple matter. It could mean fire, danger, or accident. He spurred his horse and rode faster, feeling a mixture of fear and resolve. When he arrived, he saw that a wildfire had begun to spread across the dry grasses and brush. The flames licked the edge of the settlement, threatening the cabins, the gardens, and the animals. Panic was beginning to spread among the community members. Children cried, women shouted instructions, and the elders tried to organize a plan to protect what they could. Lita stood at the center, her face calm but her eyes sharp, giving orders and directing people with precision. She moved quickly, helping move livestock to safer ground, while simultaneously coordinating efforts to dig fire breaks and carry water to the advancing flames. John dismounted immediately. He knew he could not stand by. Despair. Lita, he called. I can help. Tell me what to do. She turned to him, her dark eyes flashing with both recognition and intensity. Grab buckets from the stream, she shouted. We need every hand to help control the fire. Move quickly.
John ran to the stream, filling buckets with water and passing them to those fighting the fire. He worked tirelessly, sweat running down his face as he navigated the uneven terrain.
The heat of the flames and the urgency of the situation left no room for hesitation. He realized that today his actions mattered more than words, more than promises. Today, he had to prove himself in the most direct way possible. As he worked, he noticed Lita moving with incredible skill and determination. She seemed to anticipate the fire's movement, directing people to the areas most at risk. She was everywhere at once, comforting children one moment, moving animals to safety the next, and guiding neighbors and forming lines to carry water. John watched her, amazed at her strength and courage, and he felt a deep respect for the woman who had become the center of the community. The fire was spreading quickly, fueled by the dry brush and a sudden gust of wind. John and Lita worked side by side, throwing water on the flames and digging small trenches to create fire breaks. At one point, a spark jumped toward a small cabin near the edge of the settlement. John ran ahead, grabbing a blanket to smother the flames, while Lita moved in to help secure the animals inside. Their movements were coordinated without words, an unspoken understanding forming between them.
After hours of relentless work, the fire began to lose strength. The combined efforts of the community, guided by Lita and supported by John, had contained it to a manageable area.
Exhausted and covered in soot and sweat, John leaned against a rock, breathing heavily. Lita approached him, her face streaked with ash, but her eyes still sharp and focused. "You did well," she said quietly, her voice carrying both acknowledgement and respect. "You did not hesitate, even when it was dangerous. That matters." John shook his head, tired but satisfied. "We all did it together," he said. "Your leadership made the difference." "I only followed your instructions." She studied him for a long moment, her expression thoughtful.
You are learning, she said finally.
But today is a lesson in more than bravery. It is a lesson in responsibility. Every action we take affects others. The land, the people, the animals, they are all connected.
You must remember that.
John nodded, understanding the deeper meaning behind her words. This was more than just a crisis. It was a turning point. He saw that leadership, courage, and respect were not just about physical strength or quick thinking. They were about awareness, consideration, and care for everyone involved. Lita had demonstrated this all her life, and now he had witnessed it firsthand. After the fire was contained, the community gathered near the center of the settlement. Lita stood before them, her voice firm but calm, acknowledging the efforts of everyone.
John noticed the way the people looked at him, no longer with suspicion, but with a quiet recognition of his contribution.
It was not full trust, but it was a start. He had acted in a way that proved his intentions were genuine, and the community had seen it. Later, as the sun began to set, John and Lita sat near the fire pit, cleaning soot from their hands and clothes. There was a silence between them, not awkward, but reflective. The events of the day had left both exhausted, yet aware of the bonds formed through shared struggle. "You did more than I expected," Lita said quietly, almost to herself. "Most outsiders would have fled. They would have left us to face the fire alone. You stayed, and you acted without hesitation. That says more than words ever could." John looked at her, sensing the rare openness in her tone. "Bess, I could not do otherwise," he said. "You and your community needed help, and I had the ability to provide it. I had to act." For the first time, Lita allowed a faint, genuine smile to touch her lips. It was small, fleeting, but it carried a weight that words could not capture. "Perhaps you are not like the others," she said softly. "Perhaps you are different." John felt a surge of hope, but he knew this was not the end. Trust was still fragile, still developing. Today had proven something, yes, but tomorrow would bring new challenges, new tests of character and intentions. He understood that every action, every decision
would continue to matter. The desert night settled over the settlement, quiet now, except for the occasional crackle from the remaining smoldering fire. John and Lita sat together in companionable silence, both reflecting on the day. He realized that his respect for her had grown deeper, not just for her courage, but for her wisdom, her ability to lead, and her unwavering commitment to her people. She, in turn, had seen him act with integrity, courage, and consideration, a man willing to prove himself not through words but through deeds. As John prepared to leave for the night, Lita spoke again, her voice soft but firm. "Remember this day," she said. "Not because of the fire, but because of what it teaches. Life is unpredictable. Danger can come at any moment. But those who act with care, courage, and respect will endure. Never forget that." John nodded, feeling the weight of her words. "I will remember," he said. "I will carry this lesson with me." He rode back to his homestead under the starry sky, the desert calm and vast around him. The events of the day had changed something inside him. He no longer saw the settlement as a place of caution or suspicion alone. He saw it as a community of resilience, wisdom, and courage. Trust. And he understood that earning trust here was not about words or promises. It was about actions, about showing up when it mattered most, and about respecting the land and the people who called it home. As he lay down that night, John Mercer felt a quiet sense of purpose. The fire had been a test, not only of bravery, but of character, and he had passed it in the only way that mattered, through action, respect, and care. He knew that tomorrow would bring new challenges, but he also knew that he had taken a crucial step in proving that he was different from the outsiders who had come before.
And as the stars glimmered above the vast desert,
John allowed himself to feel a small measure of hope, that in time trust could grow, bonds could strengthen, and perhaps a genuine connection could form between him and Lita, the strong widow who had taught him so much about courage, responsibility, and respect. The morning sun rose slowly over the desert, casting a warm golden light on the rugged landscape. The air was calm, the wind gentle, and the desert seemed to breathe with quiet anticipation. John Mercer mounted his horse, feeling a mixture of purpose and nervous excitement. Today would be different, he thought. The fire, the confrontation with the neighboring ranchers. Those events had tested him, proven his courage, and given Lita reason to notice his character. But trust was still delicate, fragile as the dry grasses beneath his horse's hooves. Today he would take another step, not to impress, but to continue proving that he was sincere. As he rode toward the settlement, he noticed the community beginning to rebuild after the fire. The small cabins were being repaired, the fences mended, and the gardens tended with renewed care. Children moved quickly, helping where they could, while women and elders worked with quiet determination. Lita was at the center, overseeing every task, her movements precise, her attention everywhere at once. Yet when she saw John approaching, she did not rush or act impulsively. Instead, she regarded him steadily, as if weighing whether he had truly learned what it meant to be part of this life. "Good morning!" John called, keeping his voice calm. "Good morning," Lita replied, her tone steady. There was no warmth yet, no familiarity, only measured acknowledgement. She had seen courage in action from him, but trust required more. It required consistency over time, a pattern of integrity and care that could not be broken. John dismounted and began helping with the repairs, carrying tools, fetching water, and assisting wherever he could. He did not speak unnecessarily, letting his actions demonstrate his intentions. Lita observed, noting how he moved carefully, how he treated both the people and the land with respect. There was a quiet understanding between them now, formed not through words but through shared experience, through the trials of the fire and the daily work that kept the community alive. By midday, a minor crisis arose. A small group of livestock had wandered too close to the rocky hills, and one of the animals had injured its leg. Lita moved immediately to handle the situation, instructing John to help. Together, they tended to the injured animal, carefully wrapping its leg and ensuring it would not worsen its injury.
As they worked side by side, John noticed a subtle change in Lita's demeanor.
Best. She no longer regarded him solely with caution. There was an acknowledgement there, a sense that he could be relied upon in times of need. "You act without hesitation," she said quietly as they finished bandaging the animal. "Most outsiders would hesitate, worried for themselves." "You think of others first. That is... Bray."
John shook his head.
"I only act as I believe is right," he said. "If the community suffers, we all suffer." "I cannot ignore it."
Her eyes softened slightly. A rare moment of openness. "Perhaps you are learning," she said.
"Or perhaps you have always known how to act rightly. Either way, actions are what matter here. Words are not enough." As the afternoon progressed, John continued to assist in the community, helping repair fences, carry water, and guide younger men in the proper care of livestock. Each action, though small, was deliberate and careful, demonstrating his commitment not to take advantage, but to contribute meaningfully. Lita watched, still vigilant, yet increasingly confident that John's intentions were genuine. Later, as the sun began to lower toward the horizon, Lita approached him with a task that required both patience and trust. A small section of the irrigation system needed repair, and it required careful handling to ensure water would flow evenly to the community gardens. "Bed." She handed him a tool and guided him through the steps, her voice firm but encouraging. "This is not just about water," she explained. "It is about life. Every drop matters. Every choice matters. If you understand that, you will understand us." John followed her instructions carefully, aware of the responsibility he held. As he worked, he realized that this was more than a task. It was a test of understanding, a measure of whether he truly grasped the balance between action and consequence. Lita observed quietly, her eyes not only seeing the results of his work, but the intention behind each movement. By evening, the repairs were complete, and the community gathered near the fire pit for a moment of rest. The events of the past days had brought them closer, forging bonds through shared struggle, but trust was still tentative. A thoughtful light. Lita stood and addressed the group, her voice calm yet authoritative, acknowledging the efforts of everyone. When she glanced at John, there was a brief approving nod, a subtle recognition that he had acted with sincerity and integrity, not out of pride, but out of respect and care. Later, when the settlement quieted and the children were asleep, John and Lita sat near the fire pit together. The stars above the desert glimmered in the clear night sky, reflecting faintly in their eyes. For a long moment, neither spoke. Words were unnecessary. The events of the past days had conveyed more than any conversation could. "You have proven much," Lita said finally, her voice softer than it had ever been. "Not just today, or during the fire, but in all that you have done." "Bass, you understand the balance of life here. You act with care, responsibility, and respect." "That is rare, and it is necessary." John nodded, feeling a quiet pride, tempered by humility. "And I could not act otherwise," he said. "I have learned much from you and your community. I will continue to learn, continue to act rightly, and continue to respect this land and these people." For the first time, Lita allowed a faint, genuine smile to appear. "Then perhaps we can begin to trust one another," she said. Not fully, not yet, but in a way that is meaningful. You are different from the outsiders who have come before. That is clear now. John felt a warmth rise within him, not from pride but from the quiet satisfaction of understanding, connection, and shared respect. He realized that trust was not a single moment, nor a sudden declaration. It was a gradual process, formed through consistent action, understanding, and care. Lita had tested him, challenged him, and guided him. And he had risen to the challenge. The following days passed with a new rhythm. John continued to assist in the settlement, not as an intruder, but as a contributing member of the community. He learned from Lita, observed her leadership, and offered help where it was needed. The bond between them grew stronger, built on shared experiences, respect, and the understanding that each action had consequences beyond oneself. One afternoon, as they walked together along a narrow trail overlooking the desert, Lita spoke quietly. "You see now why trust is difficult," she said. "You see why we are cautious, why we observe, and why we act carefully. It is not weakness. It is wisdom, built from generations of experience." John nodded, understanding the depth of her words. "I see that now," he said. "And I respect it. I will act with the same care, in all things, not because it is easy, but because it is right." She looked at him, her eyes reflecting the fading sunlight. "Then perhaps there is hope," she said softly. "Hope that trust can grow, that understanding can flourish, and that connections can form even after loss, hardship, and betrayal." John felt a quiet sense of fulfillment. For the first time since arriving in the settlement, he sensed that he belonged, not as an outsider, but as someone who had earned respect, understood responsibility, and acted with integrity. He knew that full trust would take time, but he also knew that the foundation had been laid, and that foundation was strong. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the desert in deep shades of orange and purple, John and Lita returned to the settlement. The air was calm, filled with the sounds of evening activity, the quiet laughter of children, the murmur of conversations, and the gentle rustling of the wind. John realized that life here was not just about survival, but about connection, respect, and shared responsibility. That night, as John lay under the stars on his own land, he reflected on the journey that had brought him here. From the first wary encounter with Lita to the confrontation with the neighboring ranchers, to the wildfire that had tested their courage and cooperation, he had learned lessons that went beyond the practicalities of ranching or living in the desert. He had learned about trust, integrity, responsibility, and the importance of acting with care for others. And he had learned something about himself, that he was capable of rising to challenges, of proving his sincerity through action, and of forming bonds built on respect and understanding rather than convenience or self-interest. The desert stretched endlessly around him, calm and beautiful, a reminder of both the harshness and the resilience of life. John Mercer knew that his journey was far from over, but he also knew that he had taken the first steps toward genuine connection and trust. Lita, the strong and independent widow, had challenged him, guided him, and allowed him the opportunity to prove himself. In return, he had demonstrated that he was different, not just in words, but in deeds. And as he drifted into sleep beneath the starry sky, John felt a quiet hope for the future. A future where trust could grow, bonds could strengthen, and a genuine connection, built on respect, understanding, and shared experience, could flourish in the harsh, beautiful desert that had brought them together.